The way I see success is it's not just money. I see it as three pillars. One is obviously money, resources. So let's call that the wealth pillar. Then there is the health pillar. You need to have good health. I feel if you have lots of money but you're in bed all day, to me, that doesn't sound like success to me.
Yeah.
And number three is your relationships. If you have lots of money, but you always fight with your family and your kids don't talk to you, what's the point, right?
Right. Welcome to the Ways to Wealth podcast. Thanks for being on the podcast today, Andrew. We really appreciate it. I think your story is going to be really interesting for the audience. Yeah, really excited to hear about your startup. Yep. So give us the TLDR on kind of who you are and what got you to where you're at today.
Yeah, okay. So I guess, like my background is in electrical and electronic engineering. That's what I studied at university. And then after that, I worked at a medical device company where we made sleep apnea products, Fisher Paykel Healthcare. And then after that, I decided, hey, corporate life isn't really what I'm after. So I went and took a really ambitious route and did a robotics startup after that. Yep. And I did that for 2 years full time. It didn't work out. And then I ended up going back to corporate world, working at a company that makes motors and fitness gear products. And then I worked there for about 5 years. And then I made a second jump back in the startup. And this is a completely different startup. It's called Casary. It's a tax automation software product that I came up with my wife, who is now my business partner as well. So she's a tax accountant. So she came up with the concept and then we worked on it together. And that's what I've been working on right now.
Yeah. How long have you been working on it?
Full time, just maybe 8 months. But we've had the concept since maybe just over 12 months ago. Yeah. So I guess we've been working on it for just over a year.
I'd like to dig into that further soon. But I wanted to start perhaps with, did you always have this entrepreneurial bent kind of in your head? Like, it seems like you kind of having a few cracks at it. You seem to obviously have utilized also corporate to help you, I guess, financially put you in positions where you could have a crack and have a go at it. Was there a catalyst or, were you always thinking entrepreneurial? What was the kind of journey for you in that regard?
I think I've always been entrepreneurial right from the start, like in my early 20s. Because when I was working at the medical device company, like that industry is quite regulated and things typically happen more slowly than other industries for good reason, because we're working on things that save people's lives and everything needs to be, well tested and all of that. For me, as like an early 20s person, I really want to be doing things that are a bit more fast paced. And I guess that's what attracted me to that. And also at that age, you see the things on news where, this startup, making drones or making autonomous vehicles, they raise hundreds of millions in venture. And it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And so I just naturally gravitated towards that kind of stuff. And even before the robotics startup, I worked on various little side projects while I was working at my full-time job. Everything from trying to grow seaweed in open ocean to asthma inhalers. Yeah, like I made like serious attempts of those. Like those weren't incorporated companies. Those were just ideas that we worked on in our weekends with with one other guy who also had that kind of passion. Yeah. So I was already tinkering with these types of ideas in my early stage in my career, and I guess that thirst for that kind of work never really disappeared. It carried on till present day.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I guess for me, it's back then it was never really about how to make money. It was more about I just want to work on
cool stuff.
Yeah. Stuff that gets me out of the bed every morning and, kind of change the world type of thing.
Totally.
Whereas now, I guess in my later years in life, I tend to think a bit more
fiscally.
Yeah, fiscally and more realistic. And, does this make sense from a business point of view? Yeah. Because, thinking back, 10 years, some of those ideas are just way too out there. And
because it's hardware, and hardware is so much more difficult to get off the ground, it requires a lot more funding and it's often more regulated or has more barriers. Do you think that perhaps the ideas weren't too big, but as obviously the environment you need to create around your fundraising and your kind of your capital structure and your do you think it was almost like a lack of guidance from like other people that could have helped you like move forward, because it is very difficult?
Yeah, it is very difficult. And certainly in the tech space, there's certainly less support for hardware entrepreneurs than software. And as you say, there's just a lot more moving parts in hardware. You've got manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, all of that stuff. In terms of resources, I think possibly, I think it's just someone, I guess, thinking about maybe what we lack, me and the guys who worked on it, was a more of a realistic perspective of what we're trying to do. Like, I think we tend to underestimate just how difficult some of these things are. I think that's partly due to the media, because the media, they like to hype up these companies that raise 100 million, 200 million. It's almost like
you only hear about the successes.
Exactly. You only hear about success. And I think later in life, I realized that those are more of the exceptions rather than the rule.
Yeah.
And it tends to skew your perspective of what is realistic.
I also think a lot of that kind of is also a misalignment of or a misrepresentation of the time that's often been spent on these projects. I was listening to a talk the other day by the founder of Allbirds, and I believe they were basically, before they even were Allbirds, I think they spent about 8 years in development, so that's a long time before you've even sold a shoe or made a shoe potentially.
Exactly.
Maybe you're working more on the fiber and how that kind of comes together. And a friend of mine who's a shareholder of ours and works on the advisory board, he built the largest social media site for movies in the world. From a social perspective, it truly is, but it's it competes with IMDb as well. And it's a global business. They're NZ based, and the New York Times picked it up when they got acquired. So they just got acquired this year for a massive sum of money. They never raised capital, which was really good. They used their agency to basically fund it, and it was a 12-year journey. There's 12 years. It's not like 18 months ago or 8 months ago you can all of a sudden. So I think the misrepresentation of the media and what we see from these success stories is this thing is successful now all of a sudden. Whereas it's that entrepreneur and that team may have been incorporated for, let's say, 10 years, but they may have actually been working on it 3 years before incorporation and pivoted 67 times on the way to making a success. So I think, you're right. We often hear about the successes. We also hear about the monumental failures as well. And then we don't get the full context. So we might have a bit of a misrepresentation of actually how long it takes. That's definitely the case in the investment industry. And, if you're investing in a startup, obviously it's highly likely to fail. But also a lot of that is because startup founders or the investors behind the startup often give up because it's taking too long. And I think that the resilience required to run startups is a lot of it's based on, it's actually similar to a relationship as well. There's a great thing in Scrubs. I don't know if you've ever watched Scrubs. It's the doctor show.
I know the show.
The comedy. And and he goes, basically relationships break up when both people don't fight for it anymore. So, and that's the great thing about having a co-founder is, of course, you get to share that burden. But that's often why startups fail, is ultimately because there was just not enough fuel in the tank, and the founders kind of can't go any longer. So it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Not a sprint, exactly.
Although we kind of we try and treat it as lots of small sprints with some breaks, because you can also treat it like that as well, because you can go hard for a certain period of time, but you can't do that all the time. So and startups are not consistent, right? It's not progress is not the same every day for 12 years. It's this random thing happens and all of a sudden maybe you've doubled. So that's cool. So now you're working in software. Are you outsourcing that software work, or have you started to learn to program? What's the...
No, all their software is coded internally by myself.
Really? Okay, cool. So you would have had some programming knowledge.
Yes, so hardware engineering, there is a software element to it. Although much of what I know in software is self-taught. I guess I did have some foundational knowledge of what programming is.
Yes.
But for example, I've never worked on back-end development or front-end development, which I now do. Until recently. It's sort of out of necessity. We actually, with Casary, which is the new startup that we're working on with my wife, our initial goal was to first build an MVP using no-code tools. And then possibly outsource the development to an agency.
Right.
Now, when we got back the numbers and how much things costed, one, it was quite expensive. And number two is, I think, because it's a tech startup, it's quite important to have the knowledge of how the tech works in-house rather than, relying on a third party.
Totally.
It's almost like you're starting a restaurant and no one in your restaurant knows how to cook.
Yeah, totally.
It doesn't quite make sense. So we made the decision to invest into that skill back into the internally, and then I guess I became.
What did you build it on?
Backend's built on Django, and the front end is a no-code front end tool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and then we use contract designers.
The front end tool, it comes with a lot of pre-built templates of components.
Okay.
So we just use the default designs. They look pretty good.
Yeah, right.
And you just change the colors a little bit, change the padding,
okay,
and then make it kind of look how you like it. I mean, we didn't make.
That's a really lean way to do it. I like it.
Yeah. Django is what people call a batteries included framework, where all the things you need to build a backend, it comes out of the box. It wasn't too difficult. Like I knew how to program Python even before Casary, so it wasn't too difficult to get started into that. And all the tooling that we use is just the standard off the shelf stuff, just to get something built.
Totally, that's really cool. And then what's the adoption been like so far? Are you
this is what's been quite challenging for us, is that we thought the MVP would take maybe like 3 to 4 months to build, but when we looked at the list of the features we need, it actually took like way longer. I've always been thinking, are we over engineering a bit here? I always ask myself this question, but then I think about what's different about Casary is that it's actually a compliance tool, which means like when we looked at the list, as soon as you take something out of that list, your tax calculation becomes incorrect.
Right.
So, and if the value proposition of what we're trying to do, basically what we're trying to do is for New Zealand property investors, we're basically helping them to file their tax returns at the end of the year. So it's a tax software that lets you fill out the IR3 forms automatically using the data that you input, rather than what people currently do is, fire up Excel and enter all the formulas, which can be quite tricky, and tax laws change every year. So we're trying to make that process much easier. Yeah. And in order to calculate the numbers correctly, there's quite a lot of inputs you need to provide, and that's what makes the MVP quite heavy, if you know what I mean. And so, I mean, it's not like a photo sharing app where if you take away the slideshow feature, you still provide some value. Casary is if you take away any of these essential features, it doesn't really provide the value that we're trying to do. It doesn't, like, you end up with numbers that aren't correct and things like that.
Totally.
And so far we've just been, so Connie, my business partner, she gets a lot of these inquiries from property investors, and then we occasionally talk about Casary over the phone with them. Interest has been pretty good, I think. Most of the people who are interested are people who don't have like massive portfolios. They maybe have like 1, 2, 3 properties. Okay. Whereas the people who aren't that interested in this, they're people who are typically much more advanced in their investment portfolio, where they just want to hand it over to their accountant to do. They don't want to touch any software. I guess mainly because there is a stigma that software is a bit complicated, like especially accounting software. Like, you've got to learn it and figure out how it works. And maybe we could break that stigma sometime in the future when we introduce Casary, get some feedback, and see how easy it is we can make it. Like, if people see that, it's actually much easier than I thought, then possibly even those ones with large portfolios that said, no, not too interested in the start, they might be able to be willing to try it.
I was asking around basically how's it been going so far? Yeah. Is the MVP finished?
MVP is about 90%.
Oh yeah, finished. So you've got some time to go then.
So we still got some time to go, and our plan was to launch the start of the fiscal year, this coming up in April. So far it's chugging along. I mean, there's been some delays due to my health and also some other things happening in the family. But yeah, we're going to do our best to make that.
Nice. Yeah. And you've done it very leanly.
Try to do it as lean as possible, yeah.
What's the have you guys thought about a go-to-market strategy?
So the go-to-market strategy is, once we launch, we're going to probably do a soft launch, which means we're not going to do anything spectacular. It's just launch, and then we do have a mailing list of people who want to try it. So we'll start with that. And then just through word of mouth and Facebook marketing, Google Ads marketing, we'll just slowly build that audience and build that user base.
Is your plan to get funding, or are you going to try and bootstrap it? And how are you guys navigating that internally right now? So that must be quite a contentious point.
So Connie, my business partner, she runs her accounting firm. So basically,
perfect.
That's funding basically everything at the moment. And that's a very profitable business. So we're not too strained on the funding.
Oh, that's wicked. So you've got time.
So we have time. Although internally we do want all our projects to make an ROI. Like we can't be doing something that doesn't make money. Like otherwise we should do something else.
Yeah.
So there is a constraint, but that's more of an internal constraint.
Nice. Well, that's a better constraint than
yeah. So no, we don't have plans to raise funding. I mean, one of the reasons we worked on this is that it is bootstrappable. Right? It's not like hardware where you need to invest in tooling and all of that. And like it is something that we can build with our own resources. And I'm not saying we'll never raise funding. Like, I mean, we're always open to that conversation.
But if you plan to not, then that's a better position strategically to be, especially from a negotiating standpoint as well. And it's also just like I said, my friend who, had that exit, he has had a number of these exits now where, the number that the company got acquired for might be smaller than, like I compare it to Vend, right? Vend got acquired for, I think, 300 million, 320 USD. And then I think of Letterbox, I think that it was 120 or 150 US was the valuation. And, what's the better outcome? I would argue that the Letterbox is because the founders got everything. Whereas in Vend's case, the founders were heavily diluted. They had like sub 10%, I believe, when they got acquired. So, there's your difference, right? Like,
it's how much
you end up taking out as a founder, not necessarily the ultimate number that it sells for. And, you guys would be well positioned for a more modest, kind of smaller acquisition because it could fulfill a really nice business case for a number of different, I guess, players in the market. That's really cool. I like to see, especially in this day and age. Now, I do think with the framework you've chosen, the good thing is you've got lots of time and it's not going to be super high volume. But I think with the framework and the tech stack you've chosen, if you do scale, you're probably going to have to refactor a lot of it and probably actually, one at a time. Probably go with I would probably pick the front end first and then go on to React probably and then look at if you needed to refactor the back end just for scaling purposes and such. So that's cool. But you've probably got a year and a half before you even need to entertain that idea.
So I mean, like the tech stack we picked is prioritized on rapid development rather than scalability because as a startup, that's what's the most important. It's being able to rapidly build something and rapidly change it. Scalability becomes more important when you sort of know 90% this is what the product's going to be, and then let's build it out properly. The front-end framework, it does let you to export the code in Vue.js.
Oh, okay. How is it all? Because we built on Vue.
All right, you built on Vue. Okay.
Because we have in our portfolio, in addition, we do have a number of different startups. So we have equity stakes in, although Acuity is our main business. So I think, probably 50-50 between React and Vue across the portfolio.
All right.
But internally, like for Acuity, we're on Vue. Now, we have been making some rumblings internally about going to React just for that developer community for the packages. It's quite nice. But I actually think Vue is a great language and it's really easy and quick to pick up and it is quick for rapid development as well, I would say.
Although I haven't seen what the exported code looks like. So, I mean, sometimes these programs, they export code, but it's not very useful because it's not readable or whatever.
Yeah. Have you started to adopt like Co-pilots and AI?
Very heavily AI. I mean, that's one of the reasons we could build what we built with the resources we have. Is we're using Co-pilot every day to basically, like most of our code is AI. Like AI doesn't do a perfect job. You still need that software guy to like fine tune the code and definitely make it actually fit properly with the rest of the code base. But it's extremely helpful.
That's cool. That's really cool. So what does success look like in 5 years then? 5 years from now, what is success like? I think your family unit, right? Because your family unit is your family office. Your family office has a great business in terms of the accounting firm, which is a more traditional business. And then you're leveraging that to essentially build a startup business that has an interesting scalability options and a great potential exit opportunity in the future.
So I think the way I see success is it's not just money. Like success in the broad term, I see it as three pillars. One is obviously money, resources. So let's call that the wealth pillar. Then there is the health pillar. You need to have good health. I feel if you have lots of money but you're in bed all day, you're not. I mean, to me that doesn't sound like success to me. And number three is your relationships. Like if you have lots of money, but you always fight with your family and your kids don't talk to you, I mean, what's the point, right?
Right.
So I think, in fact, most people's definition of success is a weighted sum of these pillars.
Totally.
And some people may value relationships more than money. Some may value money more than some other things. I mean, that's really up to them to define for themselves. But I think everyone's definition of success is some weighted sum of those three.
I agree. And that's what we found out from our almost 100 interviews now.
For me, I see more of like a balance of the three. Like, great health. If I'm in 5 years, I could, easily do a 5K run, go to the gym and not feel tired. I wake up feeling good. That's good. In terms of relationships, great, relationship with my wife and kids and my family, extended family, friends. That's also a big part of my success means to me. And of course, the wealth aspect where, if we could get Casary and my wife's accounting business, and also we have a property portfolio, get those three pillars up to where we would like them to be, then that provides a pretty good foundation for the wealth. And also building out the legal structures so that wealth is preserved and properly passed down to our kids.
That's a good segue then. How many kids do you have?
One at the moment.
Okay, but planning on potentially growing that?
Possibly, we'll see.
So what is your thoughts on two things then? Intergenerational wealth, obviously you've kind of, definitely obviously just described it in some detail there around structuring and making sure it gets to the right place. But then the secondary point or question would be around how do we prepare our kids in this ever-changing world, especially from a career lens in a sense as well, and study.
It's a great question. I think about this a lot in terms of, so the first part of the question is how do you
think about intergenerational wealth? Is it something that's important for you?
Yeah, so I think it's important because the way I see it is it comes with education, I think. Like you got to teach your kids to value, like if, for example, if you just give them money without any knowledge of how to grow or how to preserve it, they wouldn't know what to do with it, and they'll probably make some dumb decisions, spend it all on dumb things, and end up worse off than if they just didn't have the money. So I think from a very early age, it's important to instill in them the value of wealth, and also I think just hard work. Like if they work for the wealth themselves, like they earn their own money, like they would value that much more than if we just gave it to them. So instill into them. My wife and I had a really interesting conversation about, is it good to lend your kids money to buy their first house?
Right.
And
interesting.
It's a very interesting question because my parents, they were fortunate enough to lend me some to help me with my first home.
Right.
But my wife, she financed it all completely different by herself.
Right.
In fact, she wouldn't take money from her family because she believes that you always find a way through your problems if you just put your mind to it. And that's a really powerful...
We need to have her on the podcast too, I think.
So we had this interesting conversation about should we lend our kids, do something like that for our kids. And I guess there are pros and cons to both sides, but I could totally see her side where if you put them, it sounds pretty harsh, but if you instill into them the mentality that if you try to solve this, solve problems, you can solve it. Like if you need money, you can find it somehow. Like maybe work at a job or here and there and be able to find it. Like, you don't really need mum and dad's money.
No.
Like and so I think, I don't know whether, I'm not saying we don't lend our kids money to buy
you don't know like that yet because you're not there yet.
But I think instilling that mentality that they can solve their own problems, they don't need mum and dad's money to build their wealth, and instilling them that mindset and throughout their childhood and into their adult life, I think that's probably, the best answer I have.
And then in terms of guiding them through this changing landscape, a lot of people will, especially over the last 20 years, would have been, hey, go into engineering, right? Go into software development.
It's hard to say because the world changes so rapidly. You see AI, I'm sure you hear it in the news a lot, like AI take this fear that AI might take away some of these jobs.
Yeah, and it's probably going to create a lot of jobs
and create a lot of jobs as well. Yeah, and to what extent that does AI AI affect us? And at the moment, I think I wouldn't like tell my kids, oh, you should get into this career with that.
Right.
Because it's well, firstly, she's at the moment, she's like less than 2 years old.
Yeah.
So
you're not talking about it much.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think at the early stages, just thinking about building the foundations, got your traditional subjects, maths, English, writing, and just getting them to build their skills around, teamwork, being around people, building those core foundational skills at the very early age. And then whatever the future throws at them, and they'll be able to handle it because they have those core foundational skills. And I guess we don't really know what the future entails. So it's the best you can do is just prepare for it by just learning the core foundational skills and
that's cool. Yeah, no, totally agree. I think about it a lot, obviously, having a number of children. And just like you say, I think relationships are going to just become more and more important over this period. And then I think equity ownership is also absolutely essential now. Otherwise, because I just don't see the value of time keeping up with inflation, ultimately keeping up with inflation due to how much more productivity is going to be unlocked over the over the coming decade, just like it has been prior. So I think equity ownership is something that I'm going to be advocating for with my kids for sure. And how you obtain that, obviously there's tons of different ways you can do that. But that's quite important, I think. And then doing what they're passionate about and what they love, if they can. Now I think there's a little bit like inheritance and intergenerational wealth, where that's kind of it's like a bit of a balance as well, right? Because for large portions of your career, you're probably not going to be doing what you love. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to engineer your way to that kind of state, right? Whereas I think that specifically in working class kind of background in the UK where I'm from, and I'd say it's probably relatively quite similar here. It's kind of, there's a view that you just kind of go, you just do that and you just do that forever. And that's like, just you're stuck with it and just whatever. Whereas it should be a little like, you may be dealt not the best hand, but then what you're trying to do is obviously you shouldn't have this mentality of, oh, well, I'm going to just stay in this environment. Like it has to be, okay, well, this is where I started, but I'm going to strategically navigate the best way I can. And, because we don't all start at the same starting point, it's a relative journey, right? So you're competing against yourself in a sense. And sometimes someone that starts in a kind of not great position, but they move a long way, can be a more impressive feat than someone that started in a really great position that actually moved, more further, but the relative change is different. So that's cool.
I guess I could add a little bit to that is the follow your passion advice. I think it is a double-edged sword, because sometimes at the end of the day, you do have to make a living, and there are some passions are easier to make a living out of than others. And so you do have to think about it from that practical lens a little bit. Like the way I see it is, you can think of it like Venn diagrams, where you have like what the world needs, what you're passionate about, and what you're good at. And the center of that is
a sweet spot.
Your vocation.
Right.
That's where you can do what you love and get well paid to do it, and you enjoy doing it. So I think it's always important to think about it from that lens. Not just pursue some random hobby that I'm not saying you can't make a living out of it, but some things are just easier to make. And also, if you start a business, like say you really love Italian cooking and you want to start a restaurant, like the cooking part is just a small part of that work. And you're going to be dealing with sales, marketing, people, HR, like all of those things come with your passion. And you just have to be be aware that sometimes, things like, oh, I want to start a bakery or whatever. Maybe it's not as, what's the word? There are other things that you need to do, not just bake cakes. So it's just something to be aware of.
That's awesome. So as someone that's kind of gone out on their own, had a few goes at it, and also taken advantage of your good education and ultimately having probably some well-paying jobs in the middle to kind of give you that opportunity again. Let's say you had someone, they'd been at Fisher Paykel for a couple of years, they're talented, they're doing things on their own, they want to give it a good go. What would you say the 3 things they should do before they quit the job?
All right. It's quite hard to give a very generic advice, because it depends.
You can go deep on this, and you can make it a specific example.
Let's say we could look at two scenarios. One is like, if you don't have kids, you're just like in your mid-20s type of thing, and you want to do this entrepreneurial thing. So I think it's good to just start off doing it as a side thing in your spare time, in your weekends, in your evenings. Like if you're just just single living by yourself, like it's not too hard to find a bit of time to do these things and to start exploring what you're passionate about and what you think you can deliver for the market. Like, I guess there are various schools of thought on this, and my thinking is, if this is your first business, do something that's a little bit easier. Like, and what I mean by that is, like, don't go for the electric cars and rockets. Yeah. Like, those are for, I mean, I know there are people who've done it as their first business and they've succeeded, but the likelihood that you will succeed in doing those things as your first business without Elon Musk, he had $100 million to his name when he started SpaceX.
They've done one before PayPal as well.
That's not even his first business. He's done X.com and
before X.com there was the like
Zip. Yeah, it's like an online phone book. Yeah, so he's had a few successes already before he started Tesla and SpaceX. So I think as your first business, do something that ideally you could finance yourself to what I call the minimum sellable product.
Right.
So software is quite good in this regard, in that you could code something up, build something, and start selling it with your own resources. It's not too hard. And there are probably some other types of businesses that also have these traits. And so, and just try to sell something in your bedroom, like work on it in your weekends and try to build something that you could sell to people. And once you have something you can sell to people, like even just a few people buy it, then whether to make the jump is, I guess, like it's if you want to make the jump, at least be able to commit to it for at least a year, 12 months. I mean, you don't want to just have 3 months of savings, make the jump, and then realize, I need more time, but I can't because I need to go back to work because I'm back on my savings. So at least 12 months. And really whether you want to do it is based on your individual circumstances. So if you think you can do it, like especially if you're young, if it doesn't work out, you can always find another job. I mean, so obviously factor the job finding into your budget.
Right, yeah.
So maybe 15 months, give yourself 15 months. And if you want to go for it, once you've worked on it in your spare time, you've got some people paying for it, there's some market validation there that maybe it could work. And I think that's enough to, I mean, everyone has their own risk profile and what they can handle. But like for me, I think that's and if you have the resources, go for it.
Yeah, nice.
For someone who has a family and they need to support kids, it's a bit more difficult, I think. I think for them, start, as a saying, start off working outside of work. But in that context, it's really important that you're able to provide for your family. So whether to go full time, it's really case by case. You really have to make that call yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe you agree with your wife that we're going to cut down on some living expenses so that you could do this full time or maybe even part time and you do some contracting work on the side. I mean, you just have to find some time to figure that out. My philosophy is that if you can go full time, go full time. Right. Because the rate of progress accelerates massively.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it from the point of view that if you just work on it in your nights and weekends, you could probably get maybe 10 hours of work, like decent work out of it. But you go full time, you add an extra 40 hours, maybe 50 hours. So you go from 10 hours to 60 hours. That's a 6x increase in the amount of work you can put in. And my thinking is if you go full time and you fail, that's better than doing it part time for 5 years and realizing that truth. Right. So do it full time. If it needs to fail fast and then move on to another project. Yeah. And then, don't waste time, I think. That's sort of how I would go about it.
That's great. No, I think that's really good.
There are some other things, I guess, like in terms of like finding co-founders, it's tricky in that because I had co-founders in the past and some didn't work out. I think if you want to find a co-founder, so firstly, like people say it's good to have a co-founder because they can help you with various, because you got to build a business. So basically everyone in the founding team, they have to do all the jobs of the business, And so, however, there is another side to that is that if you get a bad co-founder, you're better off just having no co-founder. Because a bad co-founder, they'll just drain all the energy out and it actually hinders the progress of the company. And so I think a good co-founder, they have to have, I think perhaps the most important thing is they need to have similar work ethic to you. Like it's really hard to work with someone, even though they have the skills and you know them very well. Like if they're just dabbling in this venture and you're working on it full steam ahead and you have like on paper, you have like 50-50 shares. Like, you could do that for a few months, but eventually you're going to go, what am I doing? Like, and then you're going to start to negotiate. Hey, can you put in a bit more effort here, and a bit more effort? And then if they can't, then it's going to be a little bit difficult. So someone with good work ethic and, you know, the right skills to complement yours, and someone that you've worked with in the past, you know, I think I caution against people who just find someone off the street and let's start a company together. You know, it's So
awesome. Well, I think that's really great advice. I think you are a deep thinker by the sounds of it. It's been cool because obviously you'd like to think things through specifically, and I think that's obviously enabled you to get to where you are today. That's really cool. So congratulations on all your success. I look forward to watching how it all goes over the coming months.
Yeah, all right.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Andrew. Cheers.
Yeah.